welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. Mary, I'm so excited to have you on today's show, the Strategic Success Podcast. And so, do you mind just opening up and sharing, who you are, where you're based out of, and what do you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Courtney. This is fun. I don't usually get to do podcasts live anymore. It seems like they're always on Zoom.
Yep.
So this is kind of nice. We meet at a conference. We get to actually meet face to face. It's kind of cool. But anyway, so my name's Mary Hart. As you know, I'm a retired attorney. I'm still licensed, but I'm consulting and not practicing law now. But I've done that for about 33 years. And I'm an estate planning attorney, real estate attorney, business law attorney, self-directed IRA attorney, all that kind of thing. I've also been a real estate investor myself for 24 years and a private lender for 20 years and a national speaker and educator for over 30 years, almost probably barely your age. I've been teaching out there. So I've been around this space for a long time. And so what I do now is I run a monthly educational mentorship group for real estate investors. I teach around the country. I co-founded the SweetHart Women in Real Estate Mastermind with Wendy Sweet, and that's what I do. And I just invest for myself and lend money, and that's it.
Get to enjoy life,
Yeah,
right?
travel around several different houses, kind of fun, different parts of the country, and just have fun.
So I love that. So I want to kind of talk through some things with you, but before we do that.
Sure.
Obviously, you are a licensed attorney, but all of this is just going to be for education purposes, right?
Yes.
So let's start off by talking about, first of all, you're highly respected in the industry, specifically for talking about estate planning.
Yes, thank you.
And I feel so many people neglect this part.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the latest study is that 67% of Americans have no estate plan at all.
Yeah.
67%, that's 2/3 of our country. That's
Wow.
terrible.
Well, I actually have told this story before, but I literally sat next to a hedge fund manager one time, and he said, Courtney, real estate investors don't know when to get off the roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And then when they do, they don't have a plan for getting off of it.
They have no
right?
plan.
And so it's like most of the people, they're just surprised, shocked, whatever.
Yeah.
So talking through that, when COVID happened in 2020, so I'm in my early mid-30s, right? So a lot of people, they call me a young buck, right? Like here in the industry. But in 2020, when COVID was happening, it hit me really hard that like, wow, I started buying all these properties. I started owning properties. At that point, I had my very first partnership with someone else. I was using private money frequently. I was buying with creative financing, everything from subject to seller financing, other things, yet I had none of this in place.
Right.
And I was doing a disservice. So that's when, I started off with, some of the basics, right? Just having a will and things like that. So talk to me, why do you think people neglect it so much?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons. One, everything, death seems far away. Disability seems far away. We're so busy living our day-to-day life, just whether it's working, raising kids, going to school, whatever it is we're doing, building our wealth, it's just something to do another day. We procrastinate. I don't think people like to hire attorneys. They don't want to have to find one. They don't want to have to vet one. They don't want to have to pay one. I get that. That's no fun. I'm glad I can do my own estate plan for free. Although I am about to hire an attorney to advise me about some other stuff that just because, you don't always see your own stuff very clearly. But anyway, so I think people they don't feel immortal, but they act that way.
Yeah.
And it's just something, I'll think about that later. I'll do that later. And later, sometimes we don't have a later. I just had a former friend, somebody I haven't seen in many years, but his wife just posted something on Facebook the other day, posted his obituary. I thought it was a joke. He's 62. I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't a joke. He was perfectly fine and had a series of strokes and died.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, my first thought besides was I was worried about their family and I hope they were doing okay was, oh my gosh, I hope he had everything in place. Because now if he didn't, that's so much worse for the family than if things had been in place. The documents, the information they needed, to really administer his estate and just be able to grieve for the sake of grieving and not being stressed out, confused, scared by all the who pays the bills, where's
buried
this?
in the details.
Buried in the details. And details, they don't even know what those details are.
Yes.
So it's like, for those of us who are real estate investors, oftentimes it is one person who has everything in their head.
Yeah.
what's on auto pay, what account does it come out of, who's the property manager, who's the HVAC guy, who's the electrician.
Who's the lender?
Who's the lender? Or if you're a private lender, how many notes are out there?
Yeah.
Who have you borrowed from? What are the terms of those
states?
notes? When are they due? Do you have those somewhere your family can find them? And so a lot of us, especially as type A entrepreneurial, real estate entrepreneurs, we just go, and it's all up here, and we will get it down on paper someday, and then we die, or we get dementia, or we get hit by a car, and all of a sudden we're leaving our loved ones not having a clue, maybe not even what we own, much less how to manage it.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
So we've talked about this a lot. Procrastination is just that arrogance that God, is required to give you another day to then figure it out, right? And I'm right there. I'm a high, visionary type that's, I'm out there making a ton of things happen, but we're not always strong with the paperwork and things like that.
That's me. I'm the visionary. I'm not the integrator, so my details are rough. I have to force myself to do the details. And I'm working on my own stuff right now.
Look, absolutely. So a huge part to that is, it's always a someday thing.
Yeah.
And then, but we all know someone, and maybe it's just a motivated seller we bought from who didn't have it set up right. And a lot of people, so we've got 300 people in the room next to us here at this conference, and so many people are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for building generational wealth. Most of it is not passed down to the next family because they just don't plan it properly.
Right. They don't plan it properly, or they don't realize that their dream of building a real estate portfolio is not the kids' dream.
Yep.
And the kids don't even understand the concepts behind it, and so things get sold at fire sale prices, and it just, everything that the mom or dad worked so hard for just eviscerates, goes away. And or they might be left with something, but not what it could have been, or not what it would have been if they knew enough even to sell it properly. So there's a lot of education, I think, that needs to be passed on to the next generation, a lot of mentorship, or even just say, hey, if this isn't your gig and you don't want to have these apartment buildings or whatever, here's the person you call, here's the agent you should work with, here's the CPA, here's the attorney, they'll help, they'll make it all happen. But
Here's
at
the
least
exit plan.
Right,
Yeah.
at least you know what you can do, what you know.
No, and I think that's huge. So on my end, as a creative investor, a lot of times I say that I ethically intervene in other people's estate planning, meaning I ask people all the time, and Leon Johnson taught me this. Ask a seller, especially if they've owned rentals for a long time, do you have any kids? What are the names? Do you even like them?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
because that's important, right? What do they do? Do they want to carry on the family, house business, property business? I've got friends who have mobile home parks that their kids want nothing to do with the trailer trash.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And whatever that perception, whether, again, right or wrong, they're thinking, I'm doing this for my kids, I'm gonna leave it to them.
Right.
But
And
many
the kids don't want it.
They don't want it. And then many people, so I have frequently bought properties from people who inherited, hey, thank you, Dad, for this duplex, but then also not thank you, Dad, because it needs a new roof.
Right.
And and now I'm having to, even though it's free and clear, I'm having to come out of pocket to pay a roof, to pay for, whatever. And so in all your years of doing this, you now call it writing.
Your ultimate love letter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why do you call it that?
Well, because I think it's the nicest gift you can give your loved ones. So if you don't like your kids, hey, don't do your estate plan. You'll leave them in a lot of hell, excuse my language. But if you really love your family and you want to leave them the one nice last gift, then have everything organized and ready to go. So they can just grieve your death or your disability or whatever it is. And they have a nice, either a big binder or a thumb drive with everything on it. And they know every bit of information they need to know to step into your shoes. And all the documents have been prepared so that the legal estate plan, those legal wheels can just process and take care of things without a problem, without a hitch. And to me, that is the ultimate love letter. It's not some romantic, ushy-gushy thing. It's not even taking your kids on a big Disney trip. It's like, do this first. This is the nice thing. This is the nice gift. Get that done, then save for the Disney trip or the cruise or whatever. Get your estate plan done because, I've been doing this for 33 years, going on 34. And so I've seen almost every story out there. I've literally planned probably 5,000 to 10,000 estates if I had to add it all up. I've administered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I have seen families bond through grief and support each other. And I've seen families fall apart and they'll never speak to each other again.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the difference is how things were set up or not set up
Yeah.
during, say, mom and dad's lifetime.
Yeah.
Right? Because the family squabbles start when things aren't set up right.
Yep.
You know, I've seen cases where we argued for years over where mom's ashes got buried,
Yep.
who got the wedding ring,
Yep.
whether or not sibling A stole the family photos out of mom's dresser.
Yeah.
Stupid stuff that just
been
destroyed a
prevented.
family, destroyed it. The
Yeah.
4 siblings I'm thinking about, 2 of them will never speak to the other 2 ever again.
Yeah.
Their kids, the grandkids are growing up never speaking to each other now.
Yeah.
All over things like family photographs and the wedding ring because nobody talked about what should happen to that and had it in writing.
And then it's people who are, because I know us investors,
Mm-hmm.
where most of us are, you know, inherently frugal to our,
Yeah.
you know, and so we trip over, you know, dollars trying to save
Yep,
cents and vice
absolutely.
versa. Because, you know, hey, we don't want to pay for this or this.
Right.
And then what happens? Then our family
Pays more.
pays more. They pay more.
With their time, stress, and money, right? They pay a lot more.
Or with their relationships,
Yeah.
right? And things like that. You know, so this is huge. So when I had that aha movement, right? Because a lot of us know, but we don't necessarily always do better just
Right.
because we know. We
Right.
need to have a level in which the pain of staying the same alters us, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that was COVID. I lost a lot of clients, so sellers I was buying from.
Yeah.
I had a woman who I was trying to stop her foreclosure. Her husband calls me. It was usually her calling me, and her husband calls me. I was like, why is he calling me?
Right.
And he goes, we went to the doctor's office the other day, and she just fell over in the doctor's office.
And died?
And died right then on the spot, right? So we all have that story of someone.
Yeah.
And during 2020, I had so many just wild, random situations like that.
Yeah.
And everything from people in the investing industry to sellers I was helping to, you know, tenants, whatever. And I felt like I was surrounded by death that year for a lot of reasons. And I had this aha moment, you know, I was bringing on my first big partnership. I was, you know, using a lot of private money, a lot of seller finance, all those things like I was saying. And I was like, wait. I remember my goal was to own 3 properties by 30. Next thing
Yeah.
I look up, I have 30 plus properties,
Yeah.
and I had done hundreds of deals, and I'm like,
Things go faster than you think sometimes.
exactly. I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
we're so big into doing the deals that we
Oh, yeah.
forget, right?
We forget.
And so then I went and set that up. But one of the things I started doing was when I was doing seller finance deals. So I did a deal with a woman. She inherited a property from her dad, and she was 63 years old. And we did a 30-year seller financing, no balloon.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I hope to give you last payment at 93,
Right.
right? But in the case that I don't, do you have a will?
Yeah.
No, I never got around to it. So as a part of that transaction, I actually paid our attorney. So the real estate attorney had a separate office, so like a separate wing, department, whatever, that did. We hired them to do the will, a simple will. So in the event something happens to her, I don't need to know what's on it. I just need to know who to call.
Right.
Right.
And that's important because I've represented a client once, real estate investor, who had bought a parcel of land from a seller on a seller finance deal. And so it was a blanket mortgage that covered, 20 lots or something like that. And this guy needed cash to do the infrastructure for the development, my client did, before he became my client. And he wanted to sell one of the lots, like pay for that lot and have it released from the blanket mortgage so he could sell it and get the cash. And before he could get that done, the seller died.
Unexpectedly.
So, unexpectedly. The seller had no estate plan. The seller had a number of not young, but children like 21, 23 that he was semi-estranged from. We tried for years to get that. I finally got my client appointed as the executor of the estate to try to wrap this up. We could not even get the kids to come to the table. We're like, you are inheriting money. We could get them to sign nothing. They disappeared. So I think after about 3 years, my guy just said, I don't know what to do with this. I can't get anything released.
Yeah.
I don't have the cash to develop it. So my guess is he ended up selling it to somebody else, but you've got this note you can't even release because the seller
With a title fall.
is deceased, and there's nobody to administer the estate, that because even when he tried to administer the estate, we couldn't get the heirs to the table.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. Now, if that seller had a will that appointed someone as an executor, and it could have been much better, but it was a nightmare.
So that's huge, right? So one of my favorite books, and I actually read this around 2020 or something like that. It's called Extreme Trust by Don Peppers, and it's the idea that it's honesty as a competitive advantage. So trust has always been in business. Just do what you say you're going to do.
Right.
Right. So that's important.
Say
That
what you
matters.
mean what you say.
All those things, right?
All those things, yeah.
So then on top of that, they actually went further. That's no longer basically the target. The target you need to do what's in the best interest for your client.
Right.
So a great example they give is like a 7-day free trial. So a lot of companies will have that. You do a 7-day free trial. They usually have you put your credit card in up front, and then hey, after 7 days, then they'll start charging you. You've officially become a client, and they start charging you. Think Amazon, think gym membership, think whatever. And what's the extreme trust measure is, so the normal, just do what you say you're gonna do. On 7th day, you start charging them. But extreme trust is on the 6th day, you send them an email saying, hey, this is going to end tomorrow. If you want to cancel and do not want your card to be charged, click here.
Yeah.
Basically,
I love that when I get those notices.
I know, right? We're like, oh yeah, shoot.
Like, oh, do I want this? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and you're like, hey, thank you, I appreciate that. And it came back down to, you don't want your client, your best client, to be an uninformed client.
Right. Or an unintentional client.
Yes, right? And so I love that because, well, I do a lot to stop foreclosures and, deal with a lot of motivated sellers who are in difficult situations. I don't want them to be uninformed of their options.
Right.
And just use me because, well, they don't know better.
Yeah.
And so it became one of those things where I readjusted my business ethically. And so when I started thinking about, hey, how can I help people, ethically, is by doing what's in their best interest. And so things like doing a will for a seller that you're doing seller finance. What are some other scenarios you've seen in the real estate industry that has helped people? You're like, hey, I think I see something here. So for her, knowing she didn't have a will, that was the first time I did it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no idea. She has kids out of state, right? Yeah. And I wanted to at least, and it was a simple cost for me to get a simple,
it's very simple. It's not that expensive.
Hey guys, Courtney, Fricke here. We've got Aussie Steve. And look, if you have a deal that needs to get moved, Southeast Louisiana, even in South Mississippi, we're your folks. We are the largest dispo company, really in the greater New Orleans area, even Southeast Louisiana. We have great contacts in South Mississippi as well. Steve, why do we move more deals than others?
Just we're very deep in this market. So Greater New Orleans can be really confusing for national wholesalers. The comps are hard. We change block for block. We got flood zones. We get a lot of hurricanes and the likes. And just a lot of the national platforms don't have the buyers on their list. So we are deep with buyers, but we're deep with relationships, which is really important in this market. So we love JVing with out-of-state investors.
Like I said, we do a ton of business with other investors. So go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney. Fill out the information, we'll get in touch with you and we'll move this deal along.
But the other thing I would say is, the will doesn't kick in unless somebody dies. But what if she became disabled mentally? What if she had dementia, or she was hit by a car and in a coma and couldn't make any of her own decisions? I would say add to that the ancillary documents like powers of attorney, a living will, things like that, if you really want to help with the package, because those are only a few $100s. And it's the will is great if something happens to her and she dies.
But then what if she becomes incapacitated?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Or at least make them think about that.
Yeah.
How do you have things set up so that what will happen if you can't make your own decisions? What happens? I'm buying this from seller financing. When I send a check, what if you have dementia and you can't deposit that check?
Yeah.
Or you can't pay the bills for something? Who's going to take care of that for you?
Yeah. So those things are all really important. What about, so other than creative financing, the other major aspect I use is private lending. I know you do private lending.
Yeah.
So when I mean private lending, everyday individual people.
Yep.
And not all of them have this stuff set up. So what are your thoughts on that? Both from a borrower and a lender's perspective.
So from a lender's standpoint, because that's what I do, is be the lender, I realize I have all these notes out there at any given time. Right now, I'm actually in a slow period. I've only got 4 out there. But if I don't have my systems in place, and I died or I became disabled, how would anybody know who owes me money, or when those notes are due, or what the terms are?
What state are they in?
What state are they in? And what's the collateral, blah, blah, blah. So I have to do a really good job of outlining, okay, in my list of assets, there are these 4 promissory notes, or however many I have at the time, and update it every time a note changes. And I have to make sure that somebody knows where the documents are. Where is the promissory note? Where's the original promissory note? Where, the deeds of trust and mortgages are recorded, but how do you find that information? Who do we call? Who was the closing agent? Where's the HUD statement? All that kind of stuff. So that's part of that ultimate love letter to me. And I'm literally in the process of putting together probably what will be 2 big binders, and then I'm going to do it digitally as well, where I list all of that information. So if something happens to me, my husband doesn't want to deal with it. My oldest son is finally old enough, he's about your age, he's finally old enough to take everything over. And I said, well, this is coming. These big notebooks and a thumb drive, and you'll have every bit of information you need. So from a lender, you've got to make sure somebody knows what those notes are. From a borrower, it kind of depends on how the loan is set up. Let's say that you're my borrower and we're doing a construction loan where I'm making draws. I'm paying you out in draws, right? So I might fund the purchase price and you get started doing your renovation. What happens if I die before the last draw is sent to you?
It's important.
How does the money get you? You're in the middle of a renovation. Every day you delay is adding to your holding costs, right? Your insurance, your interest payments, your property taxes, that's all making the cost of your project go up, your profit margin go down. If you've got to stop everything and wait 6 months to a year until my estate can be probated and somebody can give you the next draw, boy, I wouldn't want that as a borrower. I'd want to know that my lender had maybe things are in a trust that just passes immediately to the alternate trustee steps in immediately and can make that next draw. I would want to make sure my lender is not going through probate with the account that is where the draws are coming from.
I think that's really critical. So I've got a private lender who I know they do not operate through any type of entity at all.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're like, hey, I want to help. You can lead a horse to water.
Yeah.
And so those things are huge, right? Like
Yeah.
so when not all money is the right money. Right?
That's right. I mean, you have to think about those. You have to think about those things, I think, as a borrower. And I would ask the private lender, hey, I don't mean to bring up morbid subjects, but we're doing draws here over the course of 6 months. What happens if month 3 you kick the bucket or you get hit by a car and you're in a coma? How do I get my next draw? Who's going to be in charge? And what's the paperwork that gives them the authority to give me that draw?
So I've got a private money lender that just loves paper checks.
Yeah.
Who do I contact if something happens to you, right?
Yeah.
Like things, all of that's huge.
All of that, yeah.
So you mentioned trust. Mm-hmm. Trust are a fun topic. All right, so you're not going crazy. We did have a change of scenery. At last, we're gonna continue the good content conversation. So Mary.
Yes.
We were talking about estate planning. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important, whether someone is a beginner, intermediate, especially if they own properties, they're doing creative deals, making promises to people. So whether that's a loan, seller financing promises, I'm going to take over making payments for someone that's tied to their credit, like a subject to, partnerships, all those things. Those things are important. And as you call it, it's the ultimate love letter, right? And so I think it's really important if someone were to do this. So obviously they can always look at your website and look at some of your services that you offer. But who would generally set this stuff up for someone?
So if you're talking about estate planning, trusts, and things like that, it definitely would be an estate planning attorney. Yeah. Not your real estate attorney, not your corporate attorney, your estate planning attorney.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get this wrong because I call it a yes person in real estate where it's just, oh yeah, I can do that for you too. Yeah. But really, it's almost, an a la carte service they can do, but they don't really specialize in it.
Well, it's like the handyman. Oh, I can do anything. Oh, yeah, but no. No. You want someone who specializes in wills, trusts, powers of attorney, elder law type issues. If you're an older person, you might need Medicaid planning or something like that. You definitely want to find someone this is a good 80 to 90% of their business, if not 100%.
So that's important, especially as I got into doing more types of real estate deals. I realized the type of attorney, attorneys are not one size fit all. No. When you started this conversation off, you said that you had specialized in different types of law over the years. Mm-hmm. And so people don't realize that an attorney is not an end-all be-all.
No, even when we come out of law school, we have a breadth of topics that we learn the tiniest little bit about. And then really 99% of our education is on the job when you get out and you start specializing in one particular area, most people. So I knew what estate planning was, and I knew some of the concepts, but I really learned it when I did it. I've done it for 33 years, right?
Yeah.
So you learn a lot. And then I ended up being in the other areas because my high net worth clients needed corporate work or real estate work, and I took that on and learned it. But most lawyers have one particular type of thing they do.
Yeah, so that's great. So if you guys are looking for someone to set up, talk about your website real quick if people want to find out more.
Sure. So my website is maryhart.net. It's very easy. It's not .com, it's .net.
And it's Hart with
H-A-R-T, MARYHART.net. I don't provide legal services anymore in terms of I don't draft documents. I'm licensed in North Carolina, but I'm a consultant now. So a lot of times people will hire me if they want to spend more time than you usually get with your 2-hour meeting, and we need to talk about real estate investor topics, and I will come up with the game plan that they then take to their lawyer to put together.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, could this be helpful for someone who's in a different state, like
Sure.
in Louisiana,
Yeah.
where I'm from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm consulting, I can do it anywhere. If it's a particular state, let's take Louisiana. Louisiana has a very different legal code than a lot of states. So what I would help someone like you do is come up with the game plan of how your entities talk to each other and how your estate plan might be laid out. You would take that to your Louisiana lawyer to implement it under Louisiana law.
Yeah.
Does that
so
make
that's
sense?
so that's important. And so okay, so that's a resource people can check out on your website.
Yeah, and I have a YouTube channel, an Instagram channel, Facebook channel, Facebook page, and all of that. I think there are links on my website to those.
Excellent.
I never know the names of them, but
Sure.
you know, I think one of them's called Mary Hart AIM. I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
So no, I know you have some great resources on there. I've seen it myself. So one of the things people talk about is trust with estate planning, and so all right, let's talk about trust because
Big topic.
It's a really big topic.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those topics that everyone and their mom, especially when they get on, everyone's ooh, ah, trust. They're like this shiny object.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What do you see people most often use trust for?
Well, it depends. You know, there's a lot of different uses for it. Before I answer that question, let me just say this. So what people don't realize is there are many different types of trust.
Yes.
You can have revocable ones that you can change. You have irrevocable ones. You have ones that you set up during your life. You have ones that take effect at death. They can be for a myriad of different purposes. And people don't really understand that. They just think a trust is a trust is a trust, which is not true. In our sphere with real estate investors, what I hear people talking about and using all the time are land trusts, what we call land trust, or title holding trust is another name of it. And they can be very useful, but there are a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions about what they are, how they work, what they do for you, and what they don't do for you, right?
What are some of those?
So a land trust is a revocable trust you set up. Usually you should never be the individual beneficiary, but your LLC, for instance, might be the beneficiary. Directs the actions of the trustee, which also should not be you. And so they're great for flexibility. You can do a lot of things, and we can get into that in a minute if you want to. But people are taught or told by some of the gurus out there that they are creditor-protected trusts, and they are not. So if you can control something, the general rule is if you can control something or have access to it, your creditors can get it. So if you were the individual beneficiary of a land trust and you ran a stop sign and hurt somebody and somebody sued you and got a judgment, they could basically get into your trust to get the house that's in there or whatever's in your land trust, right?
Right.
Or somebody slipped and fell in your land trust. They could sue the land trust, and if they won, they could get the equity in the house. They may not be able to find you and what other assets you have, maybe, but there's no state law protection against that like there is with an LLC that's properly set up and managed. So these trusts can be, you can do them cheap. There's no state filing, people like that. They're flexible. Let's say I buy a house in a land trust. I want to sell you the house. I don't have to deed the house to you. I can sell you the beneficial interest in my trust, so nothing changes on the public record in the Register of Deeds. So if I was out there doing hundreds of deals a year and I wanted to be really flexible and I'm only holding on to each house for 6 months, I might use land trust. But if I've got a property, like mine are all high equity, I have fewer properties. They're all basically paid for. I'm not going to hold them in a land trust because there's absolutely no creditor protection other than anonymity and a smokescreen. So if someone slips and falls and my house that has $500,000 worth of equity and they sue the trust because it's on the deed, they're going and they win, they get my $500,000 worth of equity. Yeah. So I don't like land trusts for high equity properties or high risk properties. I want to use them where there's not a lot of equity at stake, but I'm using them for the flexibility and the anonymity. It makes it harder for me to be found. Lawyers don't like to sue land trusts if they can't figure out who the beneficiaries are, and most land trusts prohibit the trustee from disclosing the identity of the beneficiary. So the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney doesn't really know whether there's a deep pocket behind that trust. So a lot of times they're going to go for a lower hanging fruit,
right?
Like another property or a big insurance policy or something like that.
Liability policy. Yep.
Yeah, so there are some benefits to the land trust, but what I have found is that people think it does a lot more for them than it does. Like I've heard it for 20 years. Oh, it's creditor protected entity. No, it's not. No, it's
There's
not.
a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
You know, the places you don't want to receive legal advice from or tax advice or whatever is from the internet or someone who's, you know, not an attorney, not a CPA, right? And we see a lot of that. You know, I think this is a big topic. A lot of people, especially in the creative space, you know, love to get into all of this, thinking that it's an end-all be-all solution. When, let's face it, most investors are not even operating their LLC properly.
Right. And they don't understand what the trust does and doesn't do for them. And it makes me nervous when I see them being touted as everybody should use a trust for every deal. BS.
Yeah.
There are some deals that they'd be great for. And there's some trusts that work perfect for this, that, or the other. But you should never believe somebody that says you should only use a trust for every single thing you're doing. Yeah. Even in an estate planning trust, there's circumstances where it's not worth doing a revocable living trust, for instance, the cost and everything else. So I'm always wary of people who are, it's an all or nothing. Everybody should do this for every deal. Right. No, and I would say at least your first time or two, if you get a land trust template from someone else, take it to an attorney and let them look at it. And people will say, oh, we can't do land trust in my state, by the way. I will tell you that land trust is nothing more than a contract. It's just a trust is a contract. Yeah. So you can do a trust pretty much anywhere, even if it doesn't have a statutory provision that allows those trusts. Some states, we may have to give the trustees more power. That's a much longer conversation. Well, but they are legal.
There's nuances to it. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They do all this really intricate deal structuring or, you know, estate planning or entity structuring or whatever, and they don't know how to operate on a day-to-day basis. They don't know what the processes are, right, to do it properly. And so most of the time, they're not worth their weight, meaning how they're
they make me nervous. I personally, the only time I've used any type of trust like that is as a lender, when I want to amalgamate a number of people's money to do one lender. So for instance, my kids, I have 3 adult children. I had them combine all their money into one personal property trust. It's like a land trust. And then that trust was the lender. So we didn't have to cut 3 checks all the time. But I knew what I was doing. Yeah. And there's no real liability associated with a note if you're not taking the property back, right? Until you take the property back. Nobody sues the bank if they slip and fall on your steps. Exactly. So I wasn't worried about the liability aspect of it. I did that for ease of administration as to get multiple lenders into being one lender. So I know in my world, in the creative finance world, people often bring up a trust when it comes to subject to, you know, Garment St. Germain Act. Yeah, you want to share any thoughts on that? I'm happy to share my thoughts about that. Because that's a common. Some people won't like my thoughts. So let's start back at the beginning. When let's say I buy a house and I have a mortgage on that house, and my mortgage documents or deed of trust, whatever it is, says if I transfer that property to someone else, I have to pay off the mortgage, right? It's due on sale clause. If I sell it, it's due, right? And so if I want to sell that property to you in a regular transaction at the closing table, when you pay the money for closing, part of that would be sent to my mortgage company to pay off the mortgage. Well, when people want to buy subject to a mortgage, now I'm the seller and you want to just essentially like buy the property and keep my mortgage in place. Mm-hmm. Well, if the bank knows that you're buying it, they could call the due on sale clause, right? So people want to use trusts to get around that due on sale clause. So I might say, well, I'm going to put my property in the 123 Main Street Trust. It's a revocable trust. The bank's just going to think it's my estate planning trust or whatever, the Mary Hart Trust. Now, I end up naming you the beneficiary after the closing. So nothing changes on the Register of Deeds. It goes from me to my trust. That shows up. But then when I sell you the beneficial interest, the new deed doesn't show up on the recorder's office, right? That's one thing. So they're trying to hide the fact that it was actually a transfer. I wouldn't do that. But anyway, part of the issue is that there is something called the Garn-St. Germain Act. So if I were to transfer my property into my own revocable trust, for estate planning purposes, there is an exemption from the due on sale clause that says the bank cannot call my note due if I transfer it to a trust for estate planning purposes, for instance. And there's language like it has to be for the same equitable interest holder. So I have the equitable interest in that property, I have the equitable interest in my trust, nothing really changed. So there's an exemption and the due on sale clause would not apply. I don't think that applies to a land trust because the equitable interest changes.
Yeah.
Don't think it applies. And so people are out there going, hey, the Garn-St. Germain Act will exempt this and the bank can't call it due if you put it in a land trust. I don't think that's true. Every other lawyer, like John Heyer, Quincy Long, other people that we've talked to, they don't believe it's true either. So I think people are being sold a bill of goods when they're told that.
Well, and a lot of times, and that's where it comes to, who are you receiving this advice from?
Right.
Right? Is it someone, trying to sell you something, and then ultimately, it's all good when you're at a conference taking notes.
All good till it's not.
It's all good till it's not. So you got to go test this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're betting the farm on it. And so all these things are important. Tell me this. So I love hearing all these things. Tell me this. In your career, if you learned a lesson sooner rather than later, what's an important lesson that if you learned it sooner, it would have impacted your career a lot differently?
Two things come to mind right off the top of my head. One is that I did not realize until I was 42 years old and somebody handed me a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that as a lawyer and owner of my own law firm, I was a glorified hourly worker. Yeah. And that if my behind was not in that chair billing hours, I had no income. And that I was going to have to work like that and save my way to retirement, which I don't think you can really do. So I wish I had realized earlier than 42 years old that either I should totally switch and be just an investor or at least have a plan B going alongside my active job. That's number one. The second thing I wish I learned earlier once I got into an investment, and I'm still trying to learn this, by the way, at 60 years old, is how to rely on other people, because I'm always like, well, I can do it. It's easier if I just do it myself. Well, you just can't go far enough, fast enough by yourself. So you need to learn how to use a team, but you have to be able to vet that team and get a team that works for you and take your time to hire the team, but fire them quickly when it doesn't work. So I wish I had learned more about scaling up and using help. And that book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, I just read that last year, and as soon as I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, could have had a V8. It's kind of like I felt when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad almost 20 years ago. And so I immediately hired an assistant and a bookkeeper. Man. Because I can do it, but I wasn't doing what I needed to do.
Right, and thank God for all those aha moments, right? That just say like, oh man, let me go this different path, right? That fork in the road. And so, look, I love that. Yeah. Man, don't we all wish we could have started sooner?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? Coming out the womb investing, right?
I wish. And I, as a mom of 3 boys, I've bbeen trying to tell them all this stuff, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. They don't listen to me until now. They're 31, 29, and 24. My 29 and 24-year-old just bought a house together that they're house hacking. They're renting rooms to pay their mortgage. And they're all starting, well, Mom, maybe you could tell me about this again? I said,
I'm now finally ready to listen.
I've been trying to tell you this for 15 years. They won't listen to me because it's blah, 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 Mom. But now they're listening a little bit, so that's good.
Well, guys, I hope you're listening. Mary, again, say one more time for folks, where's the best way people can get in touch with you?
My website's maryhart at maryhart.net. And it's MaryHart. My email is maryhart@maryhart.net. So that's easy. And then if you go to the website, there'll be links to my YouTube channel and Instagram channel and Facebook page and all that kind of stuff that somebody else set up because I'm not a techie.
Well, nonetheless, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Sure, it was fun.
I've loved it.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate it.
Sure
I'm honored to be here, so thank you so much.
Always enjoy having conversations with you when I get the chance.
I could talk forever about this stuff, so
good.
Thank you.